The Summer Games Minute, brought to you by Mass Mutual. It is one of the most coveted trophies in the world, but are gold medals really gold? Well, mostly, they're not. The gold medals given out these days are nearly entirely silver and are plated with pure gold to give them that iconic sheen. Silver medals are, of course, made with silver, and bronze medals are a combination of copper and other metals like tin or zinc. And while winning an Olympic medal is priceless, the value of the materials in the medal are not. In recent games, some of the materials used to make the medals have come from recycled cell phones. Mass Mutual celebrates women's sports history and understands the nuances in how women want and need to manage their finances. With quality product solutions and guidance, a Mass Mutual financial professional can help you plan for both short-term and long-term money goals. Learn more and get started at massmutual.com.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Whoa. Landing an account this big will totally change my landscaping business. It's going to mean hiring more guys and more equipment and new trucks for the new guys to drive the new equipment in. I don't know if I'm ready.
You can do this, and Ford Pro FinSimple can help. Our experts are ready to make growing pains less painful for your business with flexible financing solutions that meet the needs of your business today when you need them. Get started at fordpro.com/financing.
The Athletic.
The MotoGP world has been waiting with huge anticipation for the first proper Marc Marquez versus Pecco Bagnaia head-to-head victory fight ever since Marquez got himself on a Ducati. And at Jerez, of all places, we got it. And now we'd like a whole season of those, please, because that was absolutely fantastic. This is the Race MotoGP Podcast. Simon Patterson has found a quietish corner of an absolutely packed Jerez circuit to join me, Matt Beer, and Val Khorounzhiy for an episode all about that battle, plus what feels like about 100 crashes and an absolutely epic rant in the steward's office. So, Simon, Val, I said at the outset we hadn't had the big Marquez versus Bagnaia battle yet. Now, of course, they have collided already this season at Portimao a month ago, but this was the first him versus him, victory at stake at Jerez, of all the places to have it, with a record crowd all behind Marquez, the place where Marquez smashed his arm and set up this whole narrative in a way. It is everything that we were wanting from this season. It's happened already. It was extremely high quality. What is your key takeaway from the battle today, Simon?
The Pecco Bagnaia is probably the best defensive rider I've ever seen, because Marc Marquez threw absolutely everything at him today, and it just wasn't quite good enough. It's no part of today kind of changed my opinion that Marquez is not going to be the guy to challenge Bagnaia for a title this season, because Bagnaia just looked to be in absolute control of that race, even though Marquez was doing everything to try and stop him. I mean, we got such a good race, but I think the stronger guy won at the end, and I don't necessarily think that the strongest guy won at the end because he was the most complete package, but definitely the GP24 Ducati is working a bit better, and I think all things considered, Pecco rode superbly today. Marc rode as well as we've seen him ride since probably the first half of a race of Jerez 2020 when he broke his arm. I think he was superb today, but there was just a little bit lacking that Bagnaia had.
Val, what sticks most in your mind right now?
Well, in terms of who actually won it, it feels pretty evident to me that Marc Marquez should have had 37 points from this weekend, and the fact that he didn't, to me, is not like a failure, but a bit of it should eat away at him a little bit, because I think the performance was there from Friday, lap 1, basically, to get it done. Saturday, it wasn't his fault. The wet patch stuff, we'll get to it, but that's just a lottery. That's a casino, and he lost out. But today, I think he should have won. And he didn't lose it in catching up Pecco at the end. He lost it in the tentative early laps, which he admitted afterwards were about the yesterday crash and all the Moto2 crashes that he saw. And also is kind of correct. I can't really fault him for that, because I think what the battle also told me is nobody understands how to win this championship yet. And the way you win this championship is you stop chucking points in the trash, which everybody has been taking turns doing at every available opportunity. Marc to a lesser extent, because there have been more clearly explainable reasons for why he's been losing points. I think he's very much in the title fight, by the way, 100%. I think Jerez is not Kota. There was a full sector where he didn't look particularly comfortable all weekend, sector 4 with the 2 right-handers, and he was still the quickest guy out there. When the weather was mixed, he was the quickest guy out there. When the weather was dry, he was the quickest guy out there. And the GP23s obviously looked better as a collective, but Marquez still looked like the best GP23. And again, he should have won both races, I think. And this is not his track. He's good here. Remember Jerez 2020 when he probably would have lapped the whole field if he didn't crash twice. It's an interesting table setter. It's an interesting appetizer, but also people just have to stop making mistakes.
We didn't expect bad blood between these two at the end, because they are both hard racers and the kind of characters they are now. Bagnaia is a very calm guy. Marquez would not complain about someone elbow barging him wheel to wheel because he does enough of it. But they both seemed massively happy at the end, which was quite interesting in itself. It didn't seem like Marquez was thinking, "Damn it, I've lost out on a victory here." He seemed ecstatic to be in that position at all. Really, still almost like he's still slightly surprised by this. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think part of it was that he's still a little bit surprised that he's delivering, because he feels like the process isn't finished yet and there's still adaptation to come. And so whenever there is something really, really cool like today, it comes as a little bit of a shock. I think part of it is that he just loves racing motorbikes really hard and aggressively. And he's like that guy that's always, calling out other people, "Come and have a go at me if you're hard enough." And then today he got someone who was, and the two of them went head to head, and he loves that. He absolutely loves that stuff. So he walked away from it with a smile on his face, even though he could beat, because he had fun getting beaten. And then I think the last part of it is just the atmosphere at Jerez today. I mean, he was gushing afterwards about how amazing this weekend was in terms of crowd and atmosphere. And even for Jerez, which is a place that normally delivers that, this weekend did feel special. It felt really electric here on Sunday morning.
What was the actual number, Simon? Because you quoted an absolutely insane increase at the start of the day compared to what the crowd had been.
There are all sorts of numbers for like record weekend attendance and everything, which I don't like, because they're quite good at blurring the lines to make those sound impressive. But the headline number, the only number that matters, is that there was 144,000 people here on Sunday. The biggest MotoGP crowd I remember was 105,000 on Sunday at Le Mans. So basically there was a 2023 British Grand Prix worth of extra people here today from our previous busiest ever, which is just wild. But, I arrived at the circuit this morning about 6:45, and that hill around turn 9 and turn 10 was already full of people. The sun wasn't even up, and it was gates had opened at 6:30. There was a queue at 6:30 to get in when the gates opened, and by sort of 7:30 when the sun did come up, you wouldn't have got a seat in the banking. It was just incredible to watch.
That's amazing. Through the TV pictures, it seemed like the crowd was very much behind Marquez. It wasn't like Pecco was exactly getting booed either. It sounded like actually a really nice vibe.
It felt like a crowd that were here to watch good racing. So that they were just cheering everything that happened. You knew in the media centre when an overtake for the lead happened about a second before it happened, because you could hear the crowd before you could, because of the delay of the TV pictures, you could hear the crowd before something happened on screen, because they were so loud. Like they were droning out MotoGP bikes. It was so loud. It was special. It was cool day.
Of the two of them, who do you think should come away from Jerez happier? Because Marquez seemed ecstatic to be in this position, but this is quite an important marker from Pecco as well, isn't it?
Good question, actually.
I mean, I would say Bagnaia. Yeah, I would say Bagnaia, although I mean, I forgot about the sprint exit though, but I would say Bagnaia just because honestly that has even nothing to do with his win, but the fact that Jorge Martin gift wrapped him 25 points by crashing out of the lead, because that lead was looking scary coming into Sunday's race. And which is like, I just want to raise this. I didn't love the race deciding move. And I think I'm in the minority on that one, but I'm more in the Aleix Espargaro sort of school of I don't like contact. And initially, I just thought Pecco Bagnaia moved Marc Marquez out of the way, basically, to get the position back. Rewatching it, it's clear Marc turns in. So that was, Bagnaia did, I think, have the right to be alongside. I don't think he did anything particularly unreasonable. But it's not quite how you want a race to be, like, decided. And thankfully, Marc did have another go later and went wide. And Bagnaia, more traditional cutback without any contact. I enjoyed that a lot more. I'm surprised how willing they were to make contact again after Jorge Martin just went down the road and said, hey, here's 20 or 25 points for whoever one of you is smart enough to accept 20 or 25 points. Because clearly, like under the current point system and the way things work, that's more important than the win. What if that contact, both of them went down? I think that was entirely possible. At least Marc Marquez feels it was entirely possible. Pecco, not so sure. But if they did, okay, Marco Bezzecchi wins the race. Congratulations. But also, what have you done? So I'm surprised how little points racing there still is, but I guess early stages of the championship.
Well, also,
but I also don't think that.
Well, the big picture you're thinking of there is a 2024 World Championship. The big picture I think they're thinking of is I need to show I'm beating this guy. In Pecco's case, I need to show I'm beating this guy who's very famous, very good, and has turned up in my stable /team. And for Marquez, it's like I've got to beat this guy who's kind of dethroned me as the benchmark around here, and. If they do that to each other often enough, one of them is world champion this year. Although we will also get onto Martin, but
I'm sure Pecco still, part of this Marc move is, there's still those questions about his 2 titles from some circles, where it's like, did the Ducati win it for him, both of them? And I don't feel that's the case. I think all of us don't feel that's the case, but I think he does still feel he has that little bit to prove. And what better way to prove than take on Marquez in your own camp? And today he beat him. And he beat him wheel to wheel, arguably having worse pace, and he'll be elated about that. So that's why I think he is probably the happier one.
My one of many highlights actually of a really fun post-race press conference was Spanish journalist Melo Cherkles asked Marc and Pecco if they thought that move, if there was a risk of the two of them crashing. And Pecco gave a very Pecco level-headed, no, I didn't think, we were okay, we were fine. Marc just looked at him and deadpanned, yes. and then from the other corner of the stage, Marco Bezzecchi goes, me also, I thought also they crashed. I think that Pecco has to be the one that leaves here happiest, because he's the one that came into here with more expectation. Marc is still in the write it and see what happens phase of his adaptation to Ducati, whereas Pecco carries the weight of being reigning world champion. He's the guy that has a title to defend, and so far this year has done what I'm sure he considers to be a subpar job of defending it. Whereas today he proved, conclusively proved why he's the world champion. I highlighted it after the race. That I remember doing an interview with him around this time last year when he was kind of newly crowned one-time champion, and he said that he didn't consider himself on Marc Marquez's level because, kind of implying that because they'd never really battled together, he'd not done what Marc had done in the past. I mean, today goes a long way to answering that question, because I think we've seen kind of 2 head-to-head battles for the win between him and Marc, and he's won both of them now, and one of them was his first ever win. He's very much establishing himself as a better MotoGP rider than maybe I would have even considered this time last year, like he said, and wins like that, he's got to go home really, really pleased. Whereas Marc will be happy, but Marc didn't expect anything, so he's not disappointed by being P2.
Yeah, Marc certainly came into this with less to lose, whereas although they weren't that far apart in the championship, we'll get onto the championship in just a second, Marc has been ruling himself out of the championship basically for forever, despite the rest of us trying to rule him back into it. the early races evidence was that actually Marc was probably right about that. Whereas all the expectation was that Pecco has the best bike on the grid, is the reigning world champion, should be getting this done, and yet there they were both trailing. So yeah, Pecco was the one with a lot more to lose if they had both gone down in that circumstance, although Martin made it a little bit less costly as well. Interesting you mentioned Aragon 2021, Bagnaia's first victory. That is the one that I always come back to every time I'm doubting Bagnaia, and I have done it on this podcast a few times over the last couple of years when Bagnaia has found ways to lose points leads or lose race wins. I come back to the style of that Aragon 2021 victory. Okay, that wasn't against Marc Marquez at his absolute best, or certainly Honda at its best, but this was a guy who'd never won a MotoGP race, and the way he was racing Marc, the intelligence of the moves and the replies and the defence he was setting up, that just all felt so much like today. And that was his very first MotoGP win, and here he is 2 titles later, battling Marquez in different circumstances with that same kind of capacity for seeing what might happen and figuring it out almost before Marquez is, which takes some doing given what a racer Marc Marquez is. But like you say, you said Pecco always seemed in control, Simon, and yeah, I agree. He felt like he had that bit more capacity to anticipate what was going to happen next, whereas Marquez seemed to be the one in a hurry, I'd say.
When you see someone instantly able to respond when someone overtakes them and just come back right away and do it without looking out of control, that to me implies very much that you've got something extra in the bag. And then, to do that a few times whenever Marc did attack, and then I think on the penultimate or the 2 laps to go from the end of the race, to just smash out a fastest lap of the race, new lap record. Yeah, Bagnaia had something in the bag the whole time.
But I think that was only the case because Marc dug himself a hole in the early going. Again, I think if Bagnaia was fully in control, we've seen that race before. That 1 second gap that he has, that doesn't erode. He doesn't let Marc come close enough to attack if he's fully in control. I think Marc was quicker this weekend than basically anybody else, and that's not to besmirch Bagnaia in any way. Obviously, Bagnaia is the one who got the 25 and earned it and did that really good fastest lap on lap 23 or 25. The what is it, 37.4? Just sort of that broke the back of Marc's challenge. And, the double overtake at the start that basically set up the win over Jorge Martin and who was it? Marc Bezzecchi. Into the hairpin round the outside where it looked for all intents and purposes like there's absolutely no way he's making the corner, and he made it comfortably. That was gorgeous. It's a great win.
That was incredible.
Yeah,
that was. I don't think I've seen many moves in MotoGP that left me feeling like that one, because you see people line up that move and they're doing it to try to force the other rider in tight and get a better exit, or they're doing it just out of sheer optimistic lunacy, which Bagnaia might have been when he started that move, but that. To go down the outside under braking and get ahead in time, be carrying enough speed to outbrake your 2 rivals down the outside, but not miss the corner, and still get a decent exit. That's just like that. That should not be. I don't think that should be possible on a motorbike. Yeah. I don't feel like I see that being done. and
we've seen Bagnaia do it
as well. Well, yeah. What a signature move to have.
The thing that sticks out to me is that corner. Like we saw also Marc then later dive bomb Bezzecchi for the position in that corner, and Marc's bike looked like it was about to fall apart when he was doing it. Like he was putting everything in it to get it stopped. Just please stop. I genuinely did sort of expect him to crash when he was completing that move. Bagnaia's bike looked planted. Like it looked like he didn't brake much later than everybody else. It just looked like he was doing his normal line. And I mean, yeah, different laps, different sort of fuel levels, but still as impressive.
The other thing, because I reread that whole interview that I did with him last year, the other thing that he mentioned in it was that he openly admits that he's the sort of rider who, whenever the bike's not perfect, he struggles, but whenever the bike is right, he is, next level. And that is exactly what we saw today. I think for the first time this year, we saw him with a bike that he had complete confidence in, and he could just do no wrong on it. It's like he was walking on water with it. And that's where the confidence, to do moves like that comes from. That reading between the lines on that, that's a pretty big hint that he's in a better place altogether that we haven't seen him in this season. And, if that is the case, it's probably the day that the championship slide reverses and he starts putting some pressure back on Jorge Martin for the next few races.
Before we get on to quickly looking at Martin's weekend, Val, you've been adamant in this podcast so far that Marquez was the fastest thing around Jerez, whatever the conditions, whatever the situation this weekend. Now, okay, I think we're all agreed that this is more of a statement win for Bagnaia, but we haven't seen that from Marquez yet this season. Bagnaia has been on the Ducati forever. Marquez has been on the Ducati for 2 minutes. We're still not completely sure Marquez has actually got enough of a functioning arm to be the great rider he was at his absolute peak. How significant does Marquez's just pure pace this weekend feel to you?
Very, but it depends on the GP24's development curve for me entirely. And what also didn't help him this weekend maybe so much is there was no particular vibration issue this weekend or particular tire wear, it seems, which, there's one and the other. The rear tire wasn't being used up much going by that Bagnaia lap. But it's significant because he was not the quickest rider around Kota, and he probably was the quickest Ducati rider, but not like a whole lot. And you would expect him to be the quickest Ducati rider at Kota by like half a second, and he wasn't. So then to show up at a track that's not quite Kota, and to a track with pretty prominent right-handers, and he was fine. He was still really fast. He was exploiting changeable conditions and uncertainties better than other riders, even though he crashed in the sprint. In terms of pure pace, he was finding comfort more easily. And what he said at the start of the weekend is, now I get the bike and we're bringing it more to my natural style rather than it just being fully on my shoulders, the adaptation, which he says is making him better to start the weekend. So he's basically not playing catch up in terms of pace. He's just on there right away. And again, Friday morning, he's super fast, super, super fast. And basically that stayed through the weekend. I think it's really important. I think, again, this is not one of his like bad tracks or anything. Again, Jerez 2020, he was going to win by hours. But it's not Kota, it's not Sachsenring. So the fact that he was quickest, and I'm sure there's still room to grow, I think it is quite important, yeah.
Well, on that room to grow point, Simon, if we're saying Bagnaia's comfort with Ducati is 100%, what percentage do you think Marquez is at comfort with how a Ducati works right now? It's nowhere near 100 still, surely.
No, it's nowhere near it. And it's nowhere near 100% of something that isn't 100% of what Bagnaia's potential is, because he's an 8-year-old bike either. He really needs to be at an even higher level than Bagnaia's if he's going to challenge him for the rest of the year on the old bike. Hard to put a number on it, because there's some things that it looks like he's doing really well. There's some things that looks like he's doing really badly. From speaking to a few people, from hearing some of the numbers being thrown around in the box and stuff like that, if the rest of the MotoGP season was at the Sachsenring, he'd win the championship, but it's not. So I think that there is still adaptation, there's still improvements, but it looks like we're getting, arguably now we're in a position where we should have seen a Marc Marquez win twice in the last 3 race starts, maybe 3 times if you count today, although he didn't really lose.
Wait, are you saying he should have won Kota? So I don't sign up to that.
Oh, 100%. If the brakes hadn't went, I think he had the beating of Vinales.
Oh,
I don't buy that. I do not buy that.
I think he had the beating of him. But I mean, we'll come to Maverick in due time. But
I think might come to Maverick in a different week, to be honest, given the Aprilia's contribution to this weekend. But yeah.
Well, I mean, we can sum up Maverick with, is Maverick fixed? No, he's not.
I disagree. Yeah. We're going to have to take this to a different week. This is
we're going to come back to this in a slightly roundabout way in a minute. So you can have 7 seconds on Vignolas at that point.
Yeah. I think there's still work to be done. I don't know how much, but there's still work to be done.
So my last point before we move on to other people who, apart from what we're starting to call between us the big 3, Martin, Bagnaia and Marquez. Scores this weekend, Bagnaia only scored 1 more point than Marquez, despite ending up with the Grand Prix win because of how Saturday had turned out as well. Going into this weekend, Martin kind of had them both under control, provided he didn't then crash out of the lead of a Grand Prix, which is a bit of an old school Martin trick. He's now reversed himself towards them a little bit. He's only 17 clear of Bagnaia, with Marquez a further 15 behind that and a few places back in the championship. Who do you think... Well, I was going to say, who do you think Martin is most worried about now? I'm going to hold to that question, even I'm not sure Martin actually worries about any other rider and just kind of continues on in his own head first Jorge Martin way, which I quite admire. But what do you reckon, Simon?
I mean, I was immediately going to say that after what we saw today, the rider that Jorge Martin is most worried about is Jorge Martin. Because I think that today is going to add a little bit of crisis of confidence into the, I used to be the guy that did this and then I stopped doing it and then I did it again today. And I think he's going to have to get his head right going into Le Mans that's not the case, which I don't think it is. I think he is past that, but he might have to convince himself of that. But I think based on the way Bagnaia rode today, the fact that we're in Spain, the fact that we're at Jerez, he's got to still be more worried about Bagnaia than he is about Marquez going forward, at least for the time being.
Val, you described Martin's explanation of his crash out the lead as basically puzzled.
Yeah, because he said he braked at the same point, basically with the same pressure, didn't really have the time to get into the angle. And he fell off. I mean, it's hard to tell looking at the footage. I mean, it looked like we've seen those kind of crashes. It was not an angle job. Yeah, it was just, the bike did look pretty straight and then it just folded, which they have done at certain points this weekend. Maybe it's a tire pressure thing, maybe something like that. It was definitely looked like something, which is not to say that it wasn't a mistake. I don't know. He needs to figure out what it was, obviously, and he needs to figure out and be certain if it was him pushing too much, then he needs to figure out that is not how he wins this championship. And if it wasn't him pushing too much, then obviously he just needs to know what he did that he just absolutely cannot do. Because I thought he was in a really good position coming out of Saturday, obviously, but you can't afford to do stuff like that. He's been very fast this season, but he is not fast enough to afford this. Like Bagnaia against Quartararo in 2022 was fast enough to afford whatever, to just chuck the bike in the gravel 4 times and still be fine. Martin has a lot of good pace, but I think this weekend I'm pretty comfortable believing he was the 3rd best Ducati. So you can't do that. If the natural progression of the weekend has you losing points anyway, you just have to minimize the loss, and that didn't happen for him.
We love talking stats here at The Athletic. Here's one that's super simple to remember. Discover automatically doubles the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back to $300. That's right. You could put it towards some memorabilia you've had your eye on or treat yourself to a premium sports network. You earn and Discover doubles. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
We've broken with tradition a bit by discussing the race winner very early in this podcast, but how could we not on this occasion? But let's whiz down to a battle for 16th place that ended in a double retirement. Johann Zarco versus Aleix Espargaro on track. That was quite a dramatic crash in the Grand Prix, but what happened afterwards was the really attention-grabbing bit. So, Simon, you were in Zarco's media scrum not long ago. You can take... Oh, yeah, Simon's laughing already, listeners. It hasn't even begun, and he's already cracking up, so good luck with this.
So I'm going to caveat all of what I'm about to say by saying that in the last few months, MotoGP, the FM MotoGP stewards have done quite a good job, I think. At least from our perspective, they've done a real consistent job. And actually, despite all of my past criticisms, I've actually got to the point where Freddie and Spencer and I stopped to say hello and have a chat in the paddock whenever we bump into each other. I feel like I'm about to damage that by relaying the story of what Johann Zarco said, who got to race control after him and Aleix Espargaro fell off, which was, I think, everyone is pretty much in agreement, Aleix's fault.
Yes.
He went to race control. They sat down and watched a review of the incident from multiple angles. Freddie Spencer looked at Zarco as if to imply in Zarco's words that it was up to Zarco to decide what happened next. At which point Zarco completely lost his temper, told Freddie Spencer that he didn't like him, told Freddie Spencer that he wasn't very good at doing his job, told Freddie Spencer that it wasn't Zarco's job to dream up the penalties that Aleix may or may not have deserved. Zarco got so heated that they threw him out of race control. And then, because he was actually in agreement with him, Aleix left in solidarity. Because he agrees completely that the MotoGP riders shouldn't be doing the job of the MotoGP stewards. That was kind of backed up quite a while after the end of the race, whenever we discovered that actually there has been no further action taken, both for that and for another incident that I actually think was even worse. In terms of, Val's looking at me funny, but I'll come to that. But basically, yeah, Zarco was so strong in his words that he told us that he believes that so he's been a guy who's always been fairly like on the fence about certain things, like the need for a MotoGP Riders Union. He's been one of the guys that has never picked a side in that fight. He specifically said today that the MotoGP riders need a union so that the union can make sure that Freddie Spencer is sacked.
Yes, that is
which is about as strong as anyone has ever said.
Yeah, I'm gonna read what Zarco said there, because that is a paraphrase-ish, but it's also completely accurate. I don't think I don't think I'm misquoting there. No. We're working all the riders to have this group together, to have the right to speak, and then maybe get the right people to take decisions, said Zarco. And then in his next line, he emphasised, just in case you'd missed it, I repeat, Freddie Spencer is not the right guy in this place. So, yeah, fairly clear message from Zarco. As if the phrase, I don't like you, hadn't made that point fairly well.
The most devastating thing you can say to someone, isn't it?
Yeah. It wasn't even, it was anyway, I don't like you. Not just a specific, it was like, anyway, I don't like you.
I don't like you. The job you do it badly. The French syntax makes it so much more impactful. That I love the sentence structure of that, isn't it? It's it
was translated from French by a person with high school level French, so which is me. But yeah, I was listening to. But to be fair, it sounded very French when I was listening to the Canal Plus portion of that.
But yeah, crikey, like you say, Simon, we've had a kind of okay little spell for stewards' decisions, but this kind of really brought it back into the forefront. Should we talk about the Miller-Morbidelli thing as well, and what wound you up about this one?
Well, I mean, so it was a very similar incident, and actually, whenever we spoke to the guys afterwards, Val was disagreeing very much.
Yeah.
I mean,
Simon, finish your point, and then Val can disagree with you.
Two guys got very frustrated that the guy in front of them wasn't as fast as them and that they couldn't find a way past. So they both made slightly do-or-die moves, got it wrong, and wiped out both of them. And in that sense, they're similar, I think. The bit for me that I can't believe is that Zarco got in Franco Morbidelli's face while Morbidelli was still on the ground in the gravel trap. Miller got Morbidelli's face, right? Morbidelli said he had his earplugs in. He couldn't hear what Jack was trying to communicate with him, but he was pretty sure he wasn't asking if he was okay. But whenever you watch back the full sequence of that, there's contact.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Miller necessarily tried to headbutt him.
Yeah.
But he made a forceful forward gesture with his head that resulted in contact between their helmets.
Yeah.
Which is essentially what happened with Aleix Espargaro whenever he got ripped apart by the internet and sanctioned by the MotoGP stewards for slapping Franco Morbidelli in the back of the head whenever he claimed he was trying to gesture vaguely in his direction at Qatar. So for one of them to be penalised and the other not, I think is outrageous.
It was the kind of incident where, if it happens in football, the other player goes down immediately and it goes to VAR and there's a red card. I mean, whether that's good or not, is a discussion for a different podcast, I think. But yeah, no, it was not as strong a contact as it was in the Aleix Morbidelli case, which, by the way, Franco Morbidelli finds himself on the receiving end twice, which is amazing. But it wasn't, but it was, it was still...
I have a theory on that.
It was basically a headbutt-ish sort of situation. It was a rider going to accost another rider after a crash in the gravel trap. I wasn't particularly impressed either. And I think if the Aleix thing is a penalty, I think this is basically yes also. I don't actually think the crashes were that similar. Aleixo's crash, which to me is a slam dunk penalty that I don't really understand how he got away with, is a rider losing the bike while backing out of an overtaking move that wasn't on, and at high speed wiping out another rider. And that also didn't look like he went to check up on him, or at least in the immediate TV footage stuff, which I didn't particularly appreciate. I know Aleix was not happy with how Zarco had raced him before, and we know Zarco's an aggressive rider, but still, the speed of that crash, the corner, I would have liked to see a bit more courtesy in that particular case. And also, just a penalty, because, look, yeah. But the Morbidelli thing, it was also very ambitious, and I could see him penalized, but I think it was a different crash, because like the move was part done by then, and the crash moment wasn't Morbidelli tucking it. As far as I could see, it was the sort of the traditional two riders meeting on the racing line from two different trajectories. Again, you can penalize Morbidelli for that. I'd have to look again to know how I really feel about it, but I don't think it was the same type of crash. I think it is reasonable for those crashes to have similar or different rulings, but it's not reasonable for that ruling to be no penalty in the Aleix case. I don't get it. Don't get that part.
The other thing is, like, so we saw Marc Marquez get a penalty of drop one lap in the sprint race, going past Joan Mir for the most blatant, like, I'm just going to shove you out of the way move ever.
Yeah.
And Mir quite irately said afterwards that he went to speak to Marquez, and Marquez had basically admitted that, yeah, that's what he did. He shoved him out of the way, and that's sheer bad luck for being the guy that I shoved out of the way.
Which is why he couldn't complain today about what Bagnaia did.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and he got a fairly moderate penalty for it with the drop one lap, which I actually think...
Drop one position.
He dropped the position to Oliveira, though. Did nothing for Joan Mir.
No, I know.
Except maybe not put him in the firing line again, which...
But this is my point where Val and I differ in some of these things. I don't like the way that we've penalised riders for doing stuff. And I don't like the fact that things that I think have been racing incidents have been penalised in the past. I think that there's an argument that especially both of the things today were to an extent a racing incident, whereas the thing with Marquez yesterday was pretty harsh and it got the appropriate penalty. But if that's the new rules and that's appropriate, they need to come and tell us. They need to say, hey, look, we've reset the clock, we've dialed it back a little bit because that's what the riders want. So this is a new season and we're not going to penalise people as hard for, rubbing his racing. But you can't just unilaterally decide that halfway through a season, having started with different rules and then not told anyone what you're doing. And there's the problem.
And we haven't even got to the incident that set Zarco off, which wasn't really the Aleix thing. It was it was the...
No, it was someone else's crash entirely from a previous day.
It was the sprint
Let's
crash
do that one.
between Brad Binder and Pecco Bagnaia, and also Marco Bezzecchi was involved. So to recap that, Binder absolutely slides up on Marc, I think, then gets forced even a little bit more wide by Alex Marquez, which leaves him vulnerable to an attack from both sides on the main straight from Bezzecchi and Bagnaia. And they seem to have cleared him by the apex, but they're also fighting each other. So Bezzecchi lunges, Bagnaia tries to counter him. And at the same time, Binder basically tries to take the position back from both of them while they're still just assuming that they're about to run wide, which they didn't do enough for there not to be a crash. So in the end, Binder barges Bagnaia into Bezzecchi, Bagnaia falls off. I did not agree with that being a racing incident. I think Johann Zarco didn't necessarily either, because Binder's explanation was, it was my normal line. Okay, but it's not a normal situation. There's two bikes in front of you. Yeah, that's not how things work. But apparently that is how they work, because he got away with it. He got cleared of any wrongdoing. And Bagnaia didn't kick up a fuss, but you could tell that he kind of wanted to. So he sort of did in his usual Bagnaia way of like, oh, well, if they say it's a racing incident, then sure. But I think a rider who's behind two other riders needs to take more care, which is Pecco Bagnaia for should have been a penalty. And I'm with him, should have been a penalty. But didn't matter in the end because that race was dumb.
Do you think Zarco could be a decent chief steward one day?
No. But I think he'd be...
I was just thinking, he's got some strong views. He's nearer the end of his career than the start.
But I think he'd be the first person to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, therein lies the difference. I still think if you're going to point next rider to be chief steward, it's Andrea Dovizioso, who I spoke to his manager a little bit this weekend, and I think he's kind of now being involuntarily retired from motocross, whether he wants to or not. So he's got a bit more time in his hands to do stuff like that.
We just mentioned one sprint crash, but that was one of 15 falls in a what was it this weekend? 24 rider field. We had wildcards, didn't we? So it's a bit. It wasn't 25. 25. So 15 out of 25, still quite a lot. Not as dramatic a percentage as 15 out of 22, but crikey, what on earth was going on in the sprint? Simon, I'll let you have this one. Why were there so many crashes?
Because Jerez, it turns out, has a very unique characteristic that's not a very good one, where when it rains, the track gets wet, and then the track dries when the rain stops, and then you get to later in that afternoon and the sun comes out, and the sun pulls all the moisture that's absorbed into the very porous asphalt up to the top and creates damp patches that are very, very difficult to see, and kind of like morph and disappear and come and go as the sun comes up. And essentially, as the day got hotter in the afternoon during the sprint race, after the heavy overnight rain and a bit of rain into the morning, the track started to change. It started to get more tricky and more treacherous, especially if you went, like, the guys were talking about like a 10 centimeter wide racing line, that if you went off it, you could get so like totally unlucky and hit the deck. And everyone hit the deck. 60% of the grid crashed, which is, I don't ever remember anything like that in a race that's been declared dry without some sort of track contamination. A very expensive day. Honestly, a bit foolish looking for MotoGP, I think, because no one wants to tune in and see most of your stars in the gravel. And I think, to be honest, I think Race Control got it wrong, because when you see three riders crashing simultaneously at a corner, you have to, without contacting, without touching each other or anything, you have to assume that there's track contamination and you need to stop it and have a look. And I think that they screwed up there by not doing that. And the price that we paid for it was like another 6 crashes after that.
Yeah, because Maverick Vinales went down at the same corner the next lap in similar circumstances. And, of those 15 crashes, we mentioned Bagnaia, and I think there were a couple of others like Zarco and Bezzecchi that were just normal race crashes. But the rest were all damp patch stuff, which nobody wants to see crashes to begin with, but it's bad. It's it is casino, it is roulette. Yes, some people did better to avoid the patches, and yes, it clearly took a certain amount of skill, but I'm with Simon. If you see 3 guys fall in tandem hitting the same bit of track, you flag it immediately, you go check out the track at that corner, you see what's up. And even if you decide that's fine, that like it looks okay, maybe you restart. But I would have checked, and honestly, maybe would have called it at that point. Just didn't like it. Didn't feel right. Didn't feel like I guess entertaining to the viewer. But even then, it's not really. Didn't feel real. Didn't feel legitimate.
It was an incredibly strange
Pedrosa's podium, but yeah.
Well, yes, this is what I'm getting onto. The result it generated was extremely strange, but the riders afterwards, it wasn't like everyone was saying that should have been red flagged, was it? There were quite a few people just going, well, this is what we had to deal with. But I do see your point that 3 riders going off at once should have been we need to figure out what this is, and then we decide if we can work with it. And it sounds like most of the riders were actually quite happy working with it. But yeah, there needs to be a bit of a pause to understand that.
I think they're probably, once Race Control understood the conditions, and let's not, they understood the conditions before they sent these guys out, because they were out in between sessions with a blow dryer trying to blow dry sections of the track, so they knew that there was a risk here. I think that they should have at the very least have stuck in like an extra practice session, delayed the start of the sprint by 20 minutes, given them 15 minutes on track to get a bit of a feel for it, and we would have a different circumstance in the end. It was just, it felt fake. It didn't feel like a real result at the end of the day because of it, because it was so messy and so upside down. And I think the other thing that makes it worse is that Jorge Martin still won it. So for everyone but him, it has championship implications. If it had been a totally messy race and Martin had been one of the championship contenders that hadn't got to the checkered flag, it would have, I think, it would have left a bit of a less bitter taste in my mouth. But the fact that he did and no one else did is just like, oh, that's not good. I mean, yeah, if Dani Pedrosa had won it, no, we wouldn't be having the same discussion.
I would absolutely be having the same discussion if Dani Pedrosa had won. I would have felt it was completely fake because, I mean... No,
it would still be completely fake, but it would have been completely fake with less implications.
Yeah, I get it. Like, so that's
my
it
point.
Hurt the championship race, but, Jorge, to his credit, fixed that today.
You're not crediting Martin for finding a way through the madness and being the one who didn't fall.
No, it's
Martin who could find any excuse to fall, but didn't fall in the race where it was impossible to not fall.
All he was doing was dodging bullets he couldn't see. That's all of them were doing. I do not fundamentally believe that Jorge Martin, who has never been a particularly skilled rider in wet or damp conditions, is better at it than all of the guys behind him who fell off. And that's not to diminish his skill at all, but like Marc Marquez is the absolute master at riding in damp conditions and slick tires, and he fell off. So I don't think it was a skill thing, and that's another reason why it leaves a bit of a bitter taste. It wasn't about skill, it was about complete luck.
And then just to make it more of a lottery afterwards, we got the most tyre pressure penalties we've had in quite a while, and it changed the podium.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. So just listeners to fill you in as well, when we were recording this briskly after the race, and we were kind of hedging our bets hoping there wouldn't be a run of tyre pressure penalties, because at the time we sat down to start recording, the penalties weren't announced yet, and I was like, let's just go for it, and if they arrive live on air, that'll be an unusual listening experience. We can change the podcast as we go along and instead celebrate a Bezzecchi win or something. But no penalties in the main race. But why was there... So the crucial one was that Fabio Quartararo was one who was pinged, dropped him from third, which he had reached from 23rd on the grid to fifth, let Dani Pedrosa through to third. I was excited to see Quartararo third on the road. I was excited to see Pedrosa third in the results. The fact that Pedrosa fell off early on in the midfield on Sunday and Quartararo finished... Where did Quartararo finish?
15th, I think.
15th.
That does kind of underline the fakeness of those results a little bit. But why do you think there were so many tyre pressure penalties? Because that was pleasingly unusual for this season.
Because you set up the bike for where you think you're going to be in the race, and people were not in the position that they expected to be in the race. The majority of the penalties came to people who fell off, remounted, and then suddenly found that they had no one in front of them for 10 laps and had set their pressures lower, expecting to be mid-pack. So I think that's a pretty simple cause of it all.
Yeah. Quartararo expected to be in the pack, and he wasn't because everybody in front of him had broken away or crashed out or both. And the Yamaha isn't good enough to run with anybody, so he just spent the whole race soaking up pressure from Pedrosa. And I think Raul Fernandez was sort of in a similar situation. He's the other guy whose point scoring got affected by this. And just, I think teams weren't in a safe range. They didn't get quite enough dry running, probably. Certainly not enough running in those sort of weather conditions. The track's cold, so the pressure doesn't go up the way you expect it to. And when you marry that with the race situation, you get that sort of thing. Honestly, they got pretty lucky because if that sort of thing happened, if there was a wet sprint on Saturday and then that sort of thing happens on a Sunday in a main race, imagine if we're sitting here right now and like Bagnaia gets an 8-second penalty or whatever, and so does Bezzecchi and so do like 4 other people. I mean, the whole race is just a write-off. It's ruined completely.
Well, this is it. We were talking post-race about topics to write about, topics to discuss, and it was all with this slight fear of, let's hope this is the actual result. Now, the fact that the circumstances on Saturday were so strange is reassuring. It makes you feel like the tyre pressures aren't going to go that crazy in a normal race, but yeah, it's not an ideal look, is it?
You can be sure, because for the sprint, the requirement is 30% of laps. For the Grand Prix, it's 60% of laps. If they can't hit 30, how can you be sure they'll be able to hit 60 in the longer distance race? I mean, they were, good job, and I think Miguel Oliveira said afterwards that in a race, everybody's like, in normal conditions, everybody's okay now, more or less. Now that Michelin has lowered the requirement, everybody's okay. So for the damp races, they just shouldn't count it. Which, it's difficult. That's kind of thing. The track was never declared wet, was it? So that's the regulatory part of what you do. It's complicated. It's not the easiest situation. I don't just want to be very negative and say that somebody's doing something wrong. It's just but it could have been really, really bad. What we got instead was, a sort of Pedrosa podium-ish that doesn't really count for the statistics. Also, I mean, his weekend wasn't that good, and neither was Quartararo's, but they got a bit of time in the sun, both of them, with some Saturday heroics. So that was okay.
I don't begrudge them that. Of all the people you want to stick in a headline,
I should say, I'm worried about the implication here. I do not begrudge Jorge Martin his Saturday win either. I do actually think he did quite well to do that. And I mean, the title race is still very early, so 12 points here or there, whatever. But I didn't like the race. It's just independent of whoever won. If Marc saw it through, I wouldn't have liked it. If Pedrosa won, I wouldn't have liked it. If Lorenzo Savadori would have won, okay, that would have been hilarious. I'm on board with that. But otherwise,
I was thinking this. One of my big takeaways from the weekend is I'm so delighted that the state of Honda and Yamaha is such that Savadori got to out-qualify quite a few people on his latest.
But he's handy in the wet, Savadori. But also, true. I don't know where he finished, but did he? Oh no, because he retired the bike with some sort of issue. But he was battling Luca Marini there for a bit, I think. So I don't know what's going on with Honda, but I do not like it.
Let's just say I think he was battling Stefan Bradl and put it down. Leave it at that.
Yeah. So to finish off this episode that's been dominated by some big themes at the front, I am going to let Val touch on something he's been keen to touch on, but this is a new rule. This is the one sentence explainer. You can use punctuation in that sentence, but you got to try and keep it to a sentence, please, Val. So you get one, then I'm going to give one to Simon as well, and they're both about people we've talked about a lot recently, but haven't today. Val, what happened with Vinales this weekend? One sentence.
How am I supposed to do this without punctuation? I mean, that might be the sentence.
Punctuation, but just don't take liberties.
Bad bike in mixed conditions, comma, still quicker than other Aprilias, full stop.
Love it. That's great. Simon, your one sentence explainer. What happened to Pedro Acosta this weekend?
Got a bit knocked up at the start, but should have been the best KTM again.
Oh, that was good. I enjoyed that. All right. This is good. We should do the whole episode like this. We get Johnny, the producer, would have a much easier life if we did.
But it would basically steal all of the glory from my rider ratings because it's essentially the same format.
I like that it's basically like telegrams. Acosta knocked.
Terrible day for Acosta. Stop. KTM terrible off the line. Stop.
I mean, there's a little bit of that tone to that phrase of Zarco's as well, isn't there? I don't like you. Stop.
Stop. Yeah, please stop.
Stop.
Anyway, the good news, Val, Simon, I do like both of you. You do your job well. So, yeah, you get the opposite of the Zarco.
You're not going to get an editors union to get us out of our positions.
I'm happy. This has been a lot of fun, listeners. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed the race. I can't imagine anyone listening to this did not enjoy the Spanish Grand Prix because it was absolutely glorious, and it's been a privilege to chat to you about it on a podcast. We'll be back picking up some more loose ends, hopefully bringing you another one of our interview specials in the week before the French Grand Prix at Le Mans. Thank you for your company. Have a bit of rest after that weekend of watching MotoGP because I think that's quite a tiring viewing experience. I'll be back in your ears this time next week.
The Athletic.